on psychosis. And so I made a song. No, just kidding. Yeah, I guess a lot of people are dealing with things that fall under this larger category of psychosis. And so it's interesting because a lot of the work that I did last year, like the videos I put out, were kind of oriented towards handling larger, more metaphysical and existential forces. Because as we awaken, we go through a lot of what we're calling psychosis, but it's specifically impacted and because of these larger existential forces that our consciousness awakens to. And in this case, it expands and it reconfigures. So I'm going to be answering just a, a bunch of questions about psychosis, but as one question. But first, I'll just kind of like tell you guys what some of those questions were. Yeah, psychosis. Why is time speeding up? My mind can't handle it. Oh, why do we exist? I'm going through a lot of spirit. Yeah, that's, I mean, there was a lot, but I can't like go over all of them that had to do with this one category of psychosis. So we're just going to put all of the questions about psychosis into this response right now, knowing that this is such a large collective asking that much can be said about it, much has been said about it, and I will create more content in the future about psychosis. But in the meantime, you can watch for sure out of my catalog on my YouTube channel now. Spiritual battle. It's between being and non-being. That one would be one of the top ones to watch on psychosis. That I've already gotten a lot of feedback from people saying that that specific video really helped give them some clarity and some peace of mind around it. And whenever we have a larger clarity around something, that instantly shifts into giving us more peace of mind. So it might not be the whole thing, but having clarity is where we always start. The second one is something about emptiness. I shared a reel of it recently. It was from 2 years ago. I will actually post this emptiness video inside the description of this live stream so that it's easier for you guys to access. But the emptiness video, the paralyzed will video, the one where I was talking about that, the doom imprint. Guys have to watch my video on the doom imprint. That one is so much about so much feeding into this larger theme of psychosis as well. So I'll just actually kind of like make a playlist about it. And then whatever more feedback you guys give me, I'll be able to know what content to create in the future on that. But basically, when we're going through a spiritual awakening, we're going through many different stages of destabilization. And that destabilization doesn't always appear the same way. But what common feature it has is that it's something that we would put into words and under the larger category of psychosis. So when we're thinking of psychosis, that has a large spectrum to it, right? I don't have to tell you how that can go to a real extreme. But then what we also see before we get to that like peak extreme is that there's just a bunch of things that are destabilizing in a very intense, omnipresent way to our identity, to our ego, to our concept of self. So there's so many different ways that whatever is our security blanket or our buffer between us and a larger worldview, or us and more reality, another layer we're peeling back, will cause a lot of meltdown in the psyche. That is a term, meltdown, that Carl Jung used. He called it metanoia because, and then in fourth way tradition, it's also just called crystallization. But either way, there's a melting down of the psyche, and it really depends on how attached we are to that form of ours, that focal point that we're calling the self or our identity. that depends on how extreme that experience of being melted down or that extreme of psychosis that we're having, which is once again a destabilization. And what's being destabilized specifically during psychosis is all the different layers that make up the complex of the self. So if we think of ourselves as just more than one dimension, we're a complex. So we have the emotional body, the mental body, the physical body, the spirit, and then depending on what spiritual system you go into, there's, either 2 to 7 more bodies from there. But we can all call those other bodies the subtle bodies. They're all different forms of subtle bodies inside our own energy field and consciousness. So what we're doing during psychosis is actually unveiling more of those layers of ourselves. And that's very destabilizing to the identity because the identity is always oriented towards survival. So you have to kind of see it from the perspective of the struggle, if you will, or the revelation. Literally, that's what revelations is, but I'll do my own live stream about that. So the revealing of larger parts of our own consciousness to ourselves is not going to be very joyfully welcomed by the part of us that has oriented itself into a specific central point, focal point called the ego, which is a unique perspective of consciousness. So for all the unified field of consciousness, then the ego is specific complexes that dial into a unique perspective. But when that unique perspective is very attached and calcified, specifically calcified, now we're going to start experiencing the degree of that dismantling. So the more we're attached, it will be harder to dismantle. And so the more intense the psychosis could be linked with how identified, how attached, how strongly we were invested in that sense of self that is now being dismantled or destabilized. So there's so much to say about that. So as I answer more questions, please let me know where you want me to go with that, because it can literally go all over the board. And I want to make sure that it's more towards exactly what a person has a specific question about regarding that. But I got so many questions about that. And I always get questions about psychosis because that's a core feature in spiritual awakenings. That's a core feature of it. What's a spiritual awakening? A dissolving of one's sense of self to a larger sense of self or more sense of self. So that's something. Hi, Dawn. Okay, so Dawn Rogers says, thank you, Sarah. It gets difficult at times to discern spiritual awakening from psychosis. Okay, so the way that you could tell spiritual awakening from psychosis, and I really lean on this quote a lot because it's just accurate. It's just perfect and poetic. It's from Joseph Campbell. Maybe you guys have heard it. The Joseph Campbell quote, the psychotic drowns in the same waters that the mystic swims with delight. What that's saying is that they're not separate necessarily. They're not fully separate experiences. They're taking place in the same domain, in the waters. Only in this case, they're talking about the waters of our own consciousness, the waters of our life. And to drown or to swim with delight is a matter of how well we're able to expand, let go, receive, expand, let go, receive. And when it gets pent up, and there's so many reasons why it gets pent up. It's not just a one-dimensional reason, but when it gets blocked, it can 1111 it can manifest as stronger levels of psychosis rather than swimming with delight, or even just, swimming and being chill about it. So really what you'll see is that within mysticism itself, there was this ability to always dial into altered states of consciousness. One of the core features of mysticism, and therefore mystics, is altered states of consciousness. Altered states of consciousness is being able to alter your consciousness, just like a radio station. You're changing the dial of a radio station. By the way, that's also why you'll see people laugh a lot who are in higher states of consciousness. It's amusement is one of those ways of not only being in a higher state of consciousness, but being able to tune in to all of the data, all of the information within all the different radio stations at once. And then that gets interpreted as amusement. So when you see people laughing while they're sharing wisdom, it's not because they're disconnected, it's because they're literally able to have a large bandwidth of information. So when we see the altered states of consciousness as a way of being able to swim in the waters with delight, you don't have to do it with delight, but you get what I mean. Being able to not deny anything, but be able to shift our perceptions in a way where we're going with the flow of life, where we're expanding, and then we're able to let go, and then we're able to receive more. And so that is what I would say is like one of the defining features between being blocked and therefore incurring more and more and more into kind of like not a very spacious, not a very discerning or ability to navigate imagination or navigate consciousness and therefore reality, versus being able to kind of go into even, dare I say, like active imagination. If you guys look into Carl Jung's active imagination, that was like actually a practice about participating with imagination. And it's quite deep, but that's another way. I just want to put that out there of being able to kind of like get a grip and navigate the imagination and the psychosis that comes with it. Because if you look into active imagination, what you'll see is that a lot of times it's borderline psychosis, or it is psychosis, but now it's controlled psychosis. And the difference between psychosis and controlled psychosis is powerful. It's powerful and potent. Controlling your psychosis would be like active imagination, or it would be like, once again, being the mystic that can swim inside the waters of consciousness. That would be controlled psychosis. That also reminds me of one of my lines of poetry inside my first poetry book, How to Set Yourself on Fire. It's from my poem, A Poem to My Nihilist. And in it I say, we are hallucinations given a veil of logic. So if we're hallucinations and what we're placed upon us is a veil of logic, that's kind of like the ego helping us survive by giving us structure and giving us a sense of self, and therefore a sense of separateness, not always like extreme degrees of separateness, but just some distance so that we can interface with our reality. And that would be a veil of logic. So psychosis is also when we're blending in and out of the fact that the truth that we're hallucinations, and that then the veil of logic that we're operating on is needing an upgrade. These are great questions. Okay, another question I got was, what's a good way to transmute imposter syndrome when acting on new insights? Imposter syndrome is also something that many people have written about different ways. So I'm just going to group all the questions that fall under the category of imposter syndrome together. For this man specifically who asked this question, though, I would say it's about permission. Sometimes we're in environments where we're seeking permission and we don't know that we're seeking permission, and we don't know that we're kind of inside an archetypal theme, or we could even say like a karmic theme, where our environment is not going to give us the permission we're seeking. So what we end up doing is coping with that tension through imposter syndrome. And so what I would suggest when people are experiencing imposter syndrome is a few things. First thing is that imposter syndrome isn't bad. And I know that people can actually suffer from imposter syndrome, and therefore it could be debilitating. And in that case, I do validate that it's horrific to live in imposter syndrome. But if we can almost harness this force of what imposter syndrome is, it could be our greatest ally in evolving. One way that it could be the greatest ally in our evolving is by helping us become more in alignment. People who care about alignment and sincerity tend to be more sensitive, energetically speaking. When they are, it's far easier to fall under imposter syndrome because you're sensitive. So when you're sensitive, you care about alignment, and therefore you're going to go through deeper, more thorough lengths to be in alignment. And that journey into deeper and more thorough lengths to be in alignment can also be called imposter syndrome. That's how at least it's going to be experienced, because it's going to be experienced as like, am I doing the best I can? Am I like things that are very accountable? That's why I put imposter syndrome under the category of a beautiful problem, because sometimes people come to me with problems and I'm like, man, that's a beautiful problem. That's like you're a beautiful person. Because inside a world of growing, breaking through the clutter, that's what they call it in marketing. They call it like there's so much clutter for your attention, for your money, for your product, and it's up against so much competition that they call it breaking through the clutter. So in a world where everything is a race or perceived as that, and trying to break through the clutter, the fact that people have imposter syndrome first needs to be kind of like acknowledged at like the fact that even though it could come from a lot of trauma, a lot of insecurity, that it can be alchemized, it can be transmuted to being like, I refuse to participate the same way that the world has set us all up to participate, where we're all more focused on a formula to break through the clutter. And instead, these insecurities I have, or this lack of worthiness, or this permission I'm seeking, or whatever the insecurity is, as long as you're aware of it or semi-aware of it, and really owning it, really embracing it, then you're able to alchemize it in a way where you're going, I will do this with it. You get to determine, you get to choose what to do with it. And so it can be the greatest form of art. It can be the greatest form of uniqueness. Because what you're doing is now taking whatever you're having imposter syndrome about. In this case, it was like your recent insights. And what you're able to do is go, how can I put my energetic signature on this? How can I put my uniqueness onto this before it goes out into the world in whatever capacity it is? Whether it's just you sharing that with another person, whether that's you trying to share that in a blog or a larger platform or social media, whatever it is. Well, what typically we need to start with is looking at how it can be imprinted with our unique energetic signature. That's what is the first like layer of medicine for it. And the reason why this is the first layer of medicine for imposter syndrome is because what it's actually lacking, which makes it imposter syndrome, is this lack of uniqueness. It's going, I don't know if I got this thing right because it's not mine. I don't know if I'm doing it right because other people know more about this thing than me, or other people have higher certifications than me. So already, do you see how it's not communed with, it's not connected with enough to even be able to say, like, wow, I don't know if I'm regurgitating this thought right or this thing right. I don't know if I'm copying this thing right. So the idea of creating artistry in whatever form this is coming in, this doesn't need to be art, but take what I'm saying and then apply it as it resonates. Putting your art and your artistry onto whatever that is now making it more you. And that's not only alchemizing the fact that like you're dealing with imposter syndrome, so you're not sure if you're getting this message right and someone else looks like they're getting messages better, or you're not sure if you're getting like you're as qualified for this one program, and so you're getting certifications, but these other people have these certifications and they have more authority to speak on something. What's lacking is that ability to really own the fact that this is not just received and then spit out, regurgitated. It is so yours that it might not even be the thing that you're worried about impostering. And in that case, we have to look at imposter syndrome from another way as well. And that's, there's an issue in whatever it is, whatever the field that we think that we have imposter syndrome about. There's an issue with the ability to really connect with something and the originality if in the first place we're not inputting and outputting something on a conveyor belt of accuracy. So the more we understand ourselves and the more we understand why we have those blocks, those insecurities, and then from there, how to transmute them through understanding something by validating it ourselves, because that's something that imposter syndrome is definitely ruled by. It's validation. So being able to validate something ourselves and then create a uniqueness from it, so that then that uniqueness from it isn't like, you know what, it could have been that person's teachings, like that system's teachings, but I don't know if I'm reciting that right, but this is how I believe, or this is my thing from it. There's so many times when I've learned a spiritual system and I can't help but get my own insights. It's almost as I'm reading something, I'm getting my own cognizance about it. And in that case, I'm like, okay, what I'm reading, am I saying that right? And so in that case, I'm like, well, I could split the difference. I could tell you guys this teaching here, and then I could tell you my gnosis from it. And then there's no issue about imposter syndrome or not, because I'm not trying to be that system. I've evolved out of it. So that's also something to take into consideration as well, because I know many of my audience are spiritually sovereign or working towards that. And because of that, they might like 3 systems at once and they might be synthesizing it, or they might like learn something a lot from one system and go deeply into it, but then not really know at the end of the day if they're in full resonance with it, because they're also growing and expanding at the same time. So a lot of different nuances to imposter syndrome. And I could go on forever about that. So I'll just say more about that later at another time. I talk about that a lot in my in-person events, because that's a question people have in person. So more of the things that are like the everyday, how to be a human going through the spiritual awakening, are the core parts of my in-person events. Another question that I got, this guy was talking about the void. Yeah, my emptiness video talks about the void. Oh, okay. So I also got a lot of questions about deja vu. I had a lot from Instagram and then some from the YouTube comments that I pull from for this live stream. So deja vu, I will do an episode on because it's like the Mandela effect. It's something that you really need to like go into detail about. But what I want to say about the deja vu right now is that deja vu is actually not coming from one place. It's not one thing. When we experience it, it could be experienced as like, wow, I'm having this effect happen again. But actually, imagine deja vu more like you have a band aid on you, and another person has a band aid on them, and another person has a band aid on them. Did everybody get the band aid on them for the same exact reason? No, that's deja vu. We can have this phenomenon that we're experiencing, and it's not always for the same exact reason, even though the phenomenon we see or we experience, and what we see is kind of like the outer surface of it. And so we're like, well, you have, well, this band aid effect. What's this band aid effect? And so the deja vu effect is actually experienced anytime there is a merging. So that could be a merging of parallel realities, but it could be that beyond that. And that's what I'm going to save the rest for an episode, because it's emerging, but it's not always emerging for the same reason or at the same level. That made sense. Oh man, you guys are savage today with the questions. Okay. This question is for Sarah. How do we navigate awakening that is coming at the same time as the rise of global fascism? I would really focus on evolving into unity consciousness. There's so many different ways I could say that, but the language and the terminology is very strong. And because of that, there's a lot of attachments, and I can feel where that question's coming from. So if someone else asked it and it felt different, then I would answer it different. So specifically, the language and the paradigm that it's being perceived as is not even it's not even fully in its truth and largest form. So even though there's a lot of stuff that's going on in the world, and therefore a lot of chaos that comes with it, what I would focus on specifically is moving into more unity consciousness, because when we're focused on things from that level of reality, it's coming with too much of the polarity charge. I don't know. There's just too much to say that would not be helpful, be more triggering, but I hope that that made sense. It's not bypassing the question. It's really to the heart of it, and it might be to the heart of it without using too many words, but I would really focus on going stronger into kind of what this is bringing up for you. But beyond, I'm not saying it's all coming from you. I'm not gaslighting you, but what this is bringing up for you, how you're responding to it, and then really trying to see if you can move beyond that level of reality, because that video game, that polarity game is set up that way, and the house will win at that level of reality. But when we go through a genuine awakening, and I mean this, like a genuine awakening, what we're doing is truly being able to see through those dichotomies, those setups, those toxic systems that are ping-ponging off of each other. And then what we're able to do from there is really get a gauge on what we have full control of, which is not ever being stopped, no matter how much it looks like that, no matter how much that is. And then what we're really seeing is that, yes, fear is a part of the human experience. Yes, fear is a part of our guidance system, just like everything else, but that the language and the perception and the belief system that all of those emotional charges came from was one where fear was in control. And that was clear separation consciousness. I hope that that made sense. Thank you for that question. That was, a really needed question. That's why I took it. Yeah, don't always want to take some questions, but they're just needed in the field because there's a large collective asking. Okay, Dominic Finley, 4363 says, is the awareness of thought forms important for awakening? Thank you, Sarah. Is the awareness of thought forms important for awakening? I would actually say yeah, because thought forms are influencing, impacting, even possessing us, depending on what level of reality we're at and what level of consciousness we're accessing. So thought forms is a very important topic. I'll be making a note of that to do a video on that. But thought forms, just for those that aren't aware, feed into also a very parallel system, which is egregores, but thought forms itself belong to the mental body. So like I said earlier, our energy field is made up of many bodies, and they're called subtle bodies. But the mental body is where thought forms come from. And the stronger we think about something and the more concentration, and therefore the more life force, which equals belief, that we're feeding it. So the belief, the thoughts, the concentration, they all create these geometric patterns. And those different geometric patterns are then fed through even with the emotional body. And then those start creating colors. And then the thoughts themselves are vibrations. So you have thought forms are structures of color, vibration, different vibration rates, different levels of subtlety. Some are more real, more dense packed than others. Some have more packets of what's called quanta than others. And so that's also why not only is it important to know about thought forms, but also why the mental body itself is such an important thing to fully understand when we're going through a spiritual awakening. And I would even say one of the signs of us going through a spiritual awakening is really being able to dial into and create full intimacy with the mental body and the emotional body. But in this case, the mental body. And the reason why is because we can activate things because they've been reinforced. And we don't know that we're activating them. This is why you hear things that get really diluted in the spiritual community about like, you're not your story. If we unpack that, stories can also be these really strongly reinforced thought forms. So even though the emotional experience still needs to be addressed and resolved, the thoughts themselves need to be processed in a way without fully reinforcing them or activating them. And so that's one of the most important things to understand about thought forms. It's because there's so many other things. And then we go into the astral body and the astral level of reality. And then there's far more teachings about thought forms from there. One of them I could just say is that we are not a singular entity. That's another thing that's really important to know about thought forms. So if we are not a singular entity ever, even though we have a concentrated and singular-ish focal point, we are part of larger spheres. We are part of, like those Russian dolls, we are within larger thoughts. So let me try to say this a different way. I'm at a larger level of reality thinking or asleep dreaming that I'm Sarah. So then when Sarah in the dream wakes up to that, I'm like, oh my God, I see myself sleeping. That would be, that example is how some Western esoteric systems teach about the astral plane, how you connect with beings there. You connect with beings in the astral plane through your affinity, affinity, affinity. Another way of saying affinity is resonance, but sometimes we get bored of resonance, so I say affinity. So through your resonance, well, how do you create resonance with certain thought forms that are a part of specific beings versus other ones? That's through your sincerity. That's through a lot of different things. And we can always shift. So even if we're in a very, like poor mental state, or let's even say bitterness. Let's say we're in bitterness. And so we're now attracting or connecting unknowingly with specific thought forms in the astral plane that imbue and are all concentrated forms of that energy signature of bitterness. It's not a death sentence. We can always, that's what spiritual awakening is. It's becoming more aware, the body, mind, spirit. And so shifting affinities is also being able to shift thought forms. And this is also feeding into how we can make soul contracts in the astral. So let's say we finish a soul contract, or for whatever reason, that soul contract needs to still be completed on one person's end, but not another person's end, because they're shifting vibration drastically out of that resonance. Then we also are connected to larger beings in the astral plane, but also with our ability for those larger, we could call them spirit guides or angels, whatever you'd like to call them. They also connect people within their resonance or within their thought forms. So the more we think a specific way, there's actually an esoteric science as to why you meet people who are beneficial or soul family or just more of resonance with you, the more that you awaken or the more that you raise your frequency. I could say so much more about thought forms, but I hope that sufficed for now. Just getting more questions. Okay, another person, Crosswatcher1111 asks, do you perform the LBRP? Question mark. Or rather, do you have a preferred routine through any rituals, if any? For those who don't know, the LBRP is from the Golden Dawn. I believe it's ceremonial magic. Do you perform the lesser banishing ritual something, I believe. I don't perform any of the Western Golden Dawn. I don't perform anything from that system. I know the history of that system. I've studied the system from the sense of I'm a mystic and you need to know about Hermetic Kabbalah. You need to know about the history of Western esoterica. You need to know about all that stuff. But as far as ever being interested in that system, no, it didn't go beyond the fact that as a mystic, you have to know specific things. But the other part of the question was something about, do I perform any rituals, if any, through routine? I don't really at the moment perform. I mean, I do grid work. So there's like grid work, but I wouldn't really call that a ritual. So, like gridding, what I like to actually do is a lot of muscle testing when it comes to crystals. And so from there, I know what to grid based off of the crystals that I'm testing. And believe it or not, you guys, it is crazy. What we know about crystals is sufficient, but it is not near as much. Like some of the crystals that we think have nothing to do with one specific property or purpose end up being the ones that help either clear something or balance your energy field or act in some specific way that there's no information on the internet about that. So even the information we see on the internet about specific crystals, like, yeah, that might be true. And it might have, like those properties about it, but then they go beyond that. They go far beyond that. So I even use some crystals that aren't like specifically for certain things because the energy field is being benefited in some way of balancing that out. And I'll give you an example of that. Imagine if your energy field will come into balance and it's not because, oh, this stone balances you or, oh, this thing balances you. Imagine if it comes into balance because specifically your aura can use a line of coding. I'm just using that as a metaphor. So it's just like filling in a line of coding. And then your field's balanced, but the crystal itself isn't known for doing that. It's because the person's energy field is using that almost like a vital nutrient for them specifically, or even more generally, like it's something in the person's reality or just their environment that can actually, it could benefit other people to have that balanced. But it's just something that's not going there. What I'm getting at is that I use white aragonite a lot now for collective themes that are in all of our fields. So there's some that I think are more like specific for people. But right now I've been telling my clients and I myself have been benefiting from white aragonite. So if you guys are interested in, I know that that's not a ritual, but I'm into crystals. That's my ritual, I guess you could say. Man, you guys ask such hard questions. They're all things that I want to pull you guys up on the screen and like talk about just to make sure we're on the same page. Just make sure I'm not answering a question that is not your actual question. Okay, I will take another question from you guys. Okay, so Maria Aguirre 6403 says, I just wanted to stop by and say thank you from the bottom of my heart. On one of your videos, the word miasm struck a nerve. I researched and found a homeopath nearby. Can I just say, wow, what a difference has it been? Not only with me, but with my 8-year-old son. I always felt really inclined to do ancestral and lineage healing, but did not understand why. I feel like I'm in the right path and it's so magical how everything's unfolding. May you continue to speak your truth. Miasms. Yes, this actually goes into another question I received. So I'm going to use that one as well. Lula Rose Sideshow says, can you talk a little about the physical aspect of spiritual evolution? Despite feeling more aligned with my purpose and self than ever, my body seems to be lagging behind, generating new challenges and limitations. I come from a cult-like background where physical illness was seen as a disharmony and therefore a symptom of not doing the work good enough. At some point, you said that you had accepted your disease and that it actually brought some of your skills online. Paraphrasing. That was quite the paraphrasing. This was a very inspiring notion to me and has helped me steer away from the bad conscience of not harmonizing fast enough. Okay, this is the funny thing. It's like, you never said that. But I really do still like this question because this is something that comes up a lot inside my healing sessions with my clients. They come to me with some sort of thing like something's wrong with me because I must not be doing the work. And then you'll see that it comes from some sort of usually spiritual belief system or group that is, um, that's kind of like where they think. So in this case, she wants to know, is she not harmonizing fast enough? That is very similar to that other one that I shared about the miasms, because miasms are why a lot of people who are just either becoming more aware or what we're saying, going through a spiritual awakening, or regardless of that, even though it's hard to separate that from this, like, or are going through genuine challenges just without the history of miasms, going through general challenges where they're genuinely needing to catch up with themselves. Their body has to catch up to their consciousness. Their body has a delay time where it's showing some form of ailment or some form of disease. And this isn't the same for everyone. And they're across the board different. There is not a one size fits all answer to this question, because for one person, it could genuinely be that they have so much resistance to something in their life. And that's why that ailment, or in your case, disease, is manifesting. But that wasn't necessarily the question. The question was, you're doing the work, and now you feel bad because there's some sort of spiritual teachings basically saying you're not doing the work. Or if you are, you're not doing the work good enough because you have this physical ailment. This shows up a lot. This shows up a lot in the spiritual community. And it's sad because as a person clears out a lot inside their, not just their own personal karmic stream, but also what their soul contracts were coming in to a specific ancestry, and miasms, which is why I coupled that with the miasms question, or just the miasms comment. It's really more complex than just a straight up, well, you're not doing the work, or well, this is resistance, or this is attachment, or whatever it is. I hear it presented a lot of different ways, but it all comes back to some sort of thing where you're not being spiritual enough. But actually, what happens is the more that our consciousness expands, that's not always supported. That depends. And what it depends on is holistic factors, meaning more than just one dimension. So I did a live stream earlier this year called Navigating Awakening on a simulation. But in it, I'm talking about microplastics. And I have a few more of my friends that I'm setting up to continue that series on Navigating Awakening, because that's a very strong component that also is not being taken into account by, I would say, like the spiritual thought, or the, the spiritual mind is very much focused on the mental body. And that's great. I think that that's actually very beneficial. But none of the bodies negate the other body. And that's what can get confusing. When we look at things holistically and treat them holistically, what we see is that a person might genuinely not be doing the work. That could be the factor for one person. Another person could be doing so much work that their awareness has popped out of their physical body, has increased their frequency, and is now needing to go through an integration process called embodiment, which is why we also hear one of the key words in the spirit of the sage is embodiment. But in between those two things I just said is way more shades of gray. And I can't cover all of them. But I want us to see ailments themselves as complex, because they are. They're multidimensional. You could be a Blu-ray. I didn't even mention that yet. You could be a Blu-ray and have signed up for some sort of life path experience to alter that morphic resonance field and then to broadcast that healing to the collective. That's another thing going on. So there's so many different ways to look at this, but miasms is a very important term to know that's linked with just, spiritual awakenings and embodiment and healing. So so that I did the Doom imprint video where I mentioned that, and then the other video where I mentioned miasms is like energy upgrades, like how to receive energy upgrades. So let me know if you guys want more information specifically on spiritual miasms. I know you saw me in an interview where I mentioned that. So I know you're probably not talking about one of the videos I had made, because I recently talked about miasms inside an interview that I did, where I was talking about how spiritual parasites are linked to some of the miasms that humans are experiencing. So I'll already made a note to make a video on spiritual parasites. That's a very important topic. Ground Ruska, can you please do a video about what you've learned about crystals and grid work? Yeah. You guys know that I'm doing a mystery teaching series with Gaia, right? So when I say that I'm doing these episodes, or like I'm putting, like, these are things that will be produced and look really cool. And if you guys didn't know, I saw a few of you guys leave a question about when my series is coming out. It starts this summer. I'm not exactly sure when this summer, but the first season is this summer. I'm really excited about it. These live streams are just to make sure that I connect with you guys, and I love understanding how to better guide as a projector. Guys did it. Yeah, yeah. So many twin flame questions. It's like insane. Can awakening person energy abuse and let you think you're their twin flame? Yes. Yeah. The idea of predators in any community, it happens in every community. One of the ways that people could manipulate or be manipulative, or, whatever it is by claiming to be a twin flame or a soulmate or whatever it is. But a person's twin flame is it's a less likely experience that they're in this dimension. I'm not saying that they're not in this dimension. I'm saying it's our collective mind has made it believe that everyone, or just if you're on the twin flame journey in general, that means that they're in this dimension and that it's going on. Sometimes they're just not in this dimension. Okay, I really like this question. Can you explain the role of hesitation? I have always trusted my hesitation and connected to my intuition, and that I know when my intuition is telling me to do and to not do. Yet, like a rubber band, I feel like I'm taking actions towards the version of myself that I most want to embody, become, while part of me remains in the version of self that I'm evolving from. My impatience lies in the vivid reality of my becoming and desire to leave or finally integrate everything before my rubber band can release me into the direction of my next version. While I trust this hesitation, I just want to understand it more thoroughly. Thanks, Sarah. So this was from Sipping Sun. This is a great question. This is something that I get a lot too. It's kind of like when to take action, or am I, fully, am I missing something? Am I missing something is huge. So we just want to make sure that before, in your case, you use like a catapult, or, like moving into your next version of self, or, upgrade, whatever it may be, you want to make sure that you're not leaving anything behind. And you're using an elastic rubber band as an example of that, as a way of going, I'm being pulled back right now. And that's what is being experienced as hesitation. It's the pulling back before the snap, and it goes forward. And I really think that that is a creative and great way of viewing what hesitation is. It's going, wait, let me make sure that I didn't miss anything, because I don't want to be catapulted into my next octave, or my next, you know, stepping more into my power, or my next upgrade, when there were things still left, kind of like leaves left unturned, like things I missed, and I went prematurely into some other, experience. Hesitation is a real great way of tuning into the parts within our psyche, or within our environment, or within our reality and experience, that we still feel like needs our attention. And yet I see this as a shadow that shows up, because this can become a perpetual way of relating with our life and our life experience. It could almost be like, it's not imposter syndrome, but it has the same flavor. It falls into the same family, because it comes from this like almost over neurosis about something. And sometimes that's good. And you're picking up on the fact that this hesitation serves a purpose. So that's great. I just want to make sure to also offer, since you're already aware of the benefits of hesitation, to now balance that and provide, perhaps if you wanted to kind of like be able to soundboard that off of like what the opposite could be, so that you're aware of that as well. You might want to check to see if you have a pattern of living from the experience of hesitating on kind of like what we would call, I guess, in this age, like you sleep on yourself or something like that. You like, you kind of just stay in a purgatory space, because it's safer to kind of always excuse that state instead of just do the thing. Because let me tell you, so much gets integrated by just doing the thing. Sometimes the thing that we're missing, because we're like looking really certain in a space and we don't want to miss anything, which is still very responsible. And that's great that you're doing that. But sometimes that's a cop out, or sometimes we're just simply unaware. We're unaware that we gain whatever we were looking for by going and doing the thing. When we do the thing, that shows us stuff, and that grows. We grow by having new experiences. So life might be able to show you better something if you move forward, because it's like you're looking here and it's like, yeah, but the answer is like, if you go here, because then I could show you, I could shape reality or rearrange it to go, hey, but I couldn't do that when you were here. I couldn't do that before you took that action step. I hope that made sense. Do I know anything about Simon Magus? Yeah. He's very revered in Gnostic thought. I know that, Christianity painted him like, heavily as not just a heretic, but, like, super negative, but he's just known as, like, an um, archetypal healer, magician. I was hoping you could get some Gnostic. One thing that really helps with listening to spiritual leaders like yourself is to know the background of the person and the path that led them here. Could you share a little, or do you have a video? Yes. I have a video called Where Do I Get My Information From? And then if you go on my website, I have a podcast tab. And I specifically put podcasts there just so that people could get more of a resume about me, like a video of me speaking about those things, because I get personal and intimate when I'm interviewed or for podcasts. When I'm teaching, yeah, my personal life teachings, especially at my in-person events. Actually, my in-person events are, I would say, 90% life stories that I've just transmitted wisdom from. But beyond that, you could go on my podcast tabs, and then my podcasts are where I share the most because people are asking me questions about myself. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm gonna just take a few more questions. Dandelions and Moss says, how to deal with the void after spiritual awakening, how to recover from solar plexus emptying. Yeah, this falls under that larger category of, it sounds like there's a few things going on. One, emptiness. So I'm really going to link that video that I talked about emptiness, because that will help. But two, understanding paralyzed will, because how to recover from solar plexus emptying. Remember how I was talking about, like, we expand, we let go, we receive. When we're receiving, we can't receive unless we're letting go first. And the reason why is because that's an emptying. Just like how you have a cup of water and you pour the cup out. So now it can take more water. There's better examples of that, but you get what I mean. If your cup is filled, you can't get new water. So even, what is it? Acupuncture. Acupuncture is, an ancient Asian science, spiritual science. Acupuncture comes with the belief that all ailments are of stagnation. All ailments, they're just different forms of stagnation. And we could see this exactly replicated in water constantly, because we are water. But look at a pond. A pond doesn't move. It's it's the epitome of stagnation. So what do you see there? Don't drink the pond water. But then you see that the water that is most in motion, that is not being that has movement, has outlet, has outlet. Creative outlet is very important for you, but has outlet. Now that water is classically known to be the safest water to drink. And you could replicate that even beyond water, is what I'm saying, with life force. Because life force is still waters. So with our own life force, the more it's stagnated, it can't release and then receive. So the emptying of the solar plexus is very important. But if you're needing to recover from it, which means that it has not reconfigured in a way where where now you're not making it sound like an ailment, then how to recover from solar plexus emptying would be to kind of like understand what paralyzed willpower would mean by that. Because paralyzed will, it's also called lost will. Lost will, I believe, is how Cian de Rohan's work calls it. I literally see it in the client or in a person's energy field as paralyzed will. And it's not because it's paralyzed per se. Vibration never stops, but it can vibrate in what I consider a category where it's vibrating so low that it's in a state of paralysis. So paralyzed will is different from emptying out the solar plexus. And the reason why I keep saying will is because the solar plexus region, the will is larger than the solar plexus region, like this concept, this metaphysical concept that I'm talking about called the will. It's more than just the solar plexus region. But if we had to give it an archetypal, symbolic form, then the one it would be is the solar plexus. So the solar plexus would be the way that the will moves through the most. It would be symbolized through the solar plexus region. And if you'd like to know more about that specifically, I have a video on it. You could look up my video on willpower or the will. I did it last year, and I talked specifically about this and how it's linked to our solar plexus and the different layers of it. But the emptying of the solar plexus versus needing to recover from that emptying, needing to recover from it sounds like now it obviously didn't recover. And so that sounds to me more like something within, something happened and now it lost a lot of willpower. The one thing I would say about this is first, I know this might sound not great, but it might not always be bad when the solar plexus has emptied and now we're like in this what's next state, because the solar plexus represents our ability to be visible in the world and to move in the direction of what we want and what we wish to experience, among other things. So if we're going through a spiritual awakening, all those things I just said are going to be changed, most likely. We're going to go, wait, I don't know if I want to get that manifestation anymore. Or wait, I don't know if I care about that thing anymore. We change it, and that's all going to be very impactful. It's going to impact our will and our solar plexus the most, because our solar plexus is our like identity that goes, okay, this is who I am. This is where I'm going. This is what I want. And the spiritual awakening directly impacts all those things. So there might be like a reverb or like a shock of like, what do I want now? And so when I hear how to recover from solar plexus emptying, what I really hear is like, there's a new shape. There's a new reconfiguration that your solar plexus is going through. Or let's say this another way, the will itself is going through, it's reshaping. It's going, I don't know what I want anymore. I don't know if I want the same things. It might even go into themes many people are going into, which are like more nihilistic. And I don't say that in a negative way. I just mean more like, what's the point? Like things of that. So how to recover from all of those different stages is one, know that your willpower is going through a reconfiguration process. It's reorienting itself. It's going, okay, I wanted that one thing, or I learned about this thing and now I don't know what to eat anymore, or what's going on in the skies. Whatever the case is that's making the willpower have to reshape because it's getting new information and it's going, okay, I don't know if I wanted that anymore. I don't know if this is the best safety plan anymore, or I don't know what. Allow it to have rest. And how it rests is through being creative. So I don't mean literally rest, although you can. Allow it to be balanced. So if you're receiving information and that's what's making it go into, oh, now I'm empty because I just unlocked a new layer of reality and now it's shocked my system, that's an emptying too. Allow it to have something balanced where it's fictional or imagination oriented, something creative. That's how I repaired my will. That's literally how I did. How I recovered my willpower was through fiction. I went into creative mode. I went into just things that weren't related to needing to know things or information or anything about all the things I was learning, all the systems I was learning, all the things that I was embodying, all the things I was healing. I went into like things completely what we would call like right brained. And that's how my willpower recovered and then was able to integrate. So it might be something like that that you're experiencing, but allowing rest, allowing it to go into some form of right brain mode, giving it space, that means no pressure, which I know is easier said than done because life goes on. And so you're like, yeah, that's easy to say, but I have this job I don't want, or oh, that's easy to say, whatever. So allowing yourself the least amount of pressure so that when it's reforming and reconfiguring, it's not having false information. It's not having to give you false information. The willpower is also known as where our truth lies, meaning like our essence, who we truly are at our very core, beyond our identity, beyond all these different layers of ourself. It's like our closest link to our original essence or our original energy signature. So when it gets pressure on it or when it like has to be in a specific state or form that it doesn't want to be in a specific state or form, it's going to give false information. And this throws the whole system off because this throws off our intuition. Our intuition is what the willpower is giving information to. It can't guide us if we're giving false information. That's why it's really important to go into like almost like a performance art state of acceptance of the emotional body, our emotions, everything that's going on, our humanity, everything that is kind of like perceived as more chaotic, more shadowy inside us. Like it's so important for the willpower to be able to have the least amount of oppression and the least amount of pressure, because what that's going to do is be able to form again. It's going to reconfigure. And when it reconfigures, the solar plexus region is going to be able to orient and go, I know what direction I want to go in now. Completely different from before that emptying. And it's going to be able to give you more proper guidance. But if that process that I just said happens in a way where the willpower does not feel like it can give you truthful information, truthful guidance, then it's going to be, cycles of needing to recover the willpower. And everything that I just presented too isn't it happens once or it continues forever type deal. I'm just giving you broad strokes of these concepts. So the solar plexus is something that's always updating. We could look at it that way. But the more that we're in a severe state of it to the point where it like we need to recover our solar plexus, now we need to look at it from everything that I was just saying, rather than just going like, oh yeah, we have a new awareness, or we went through a specific internal shift. Some internal shifts are more intense than others. So when they're real intense to where we need to recover from, that emptying process, that means that at that degree or that severity, that's going to really need to be able to have some playtime or have some space so that it can give truthful information while it's reconfiguring. And then when it's truthful information as it's reconfiguring, it's like, what would that look like? That would mean that the solar plexus, everything that it does now, it's doing in more alignment with you. So the solar plexus is being visible. That would be one where you're more accurate in whatever way you want to be visible. Whether that's going after a job or whether that's, speaking your truth and being visible in your truth or whatever it is. And then all the other themes that the solar plexus does as well, like worthiness, being able to even be seen going after what you want. That's a huge one for just empathic people in general. So there's a lot of different things going on with that, but I hope that gave more clarity and guidance to it. You guys, thank you so much. I love doing these. Please let me know in the comments if you want more live streams or what questions here really spoke to you, and if you got any benefit or value out of this, or just any type of feedback. I love you guys. I'm sending you infinite love and gratitude. Have a great day.